For Real Agriculture, I'm Kelvin Heppner. Federal Minister of Agriculture and Agri-Food Lawrence MacAulay has returned from a trip to Asia, which included a trade mission to Japan. And he joins us now here on Real Agriculture. Minister MacAulay, it's first of all good to speak with you again. It's been a few years. Congratulations on returning to your former office. How have the first few months in the minister's role gone for you?
Kelvin, it's great to be back. I mean, being a farmer and the Minister of Agriculture for Canada is indeed an honor. And farmers are not all that plentiful in the House of Commons, and I'm very pleased to be the one that was picked to be the Minister of Agriculture and Agri-Food for the country. Never dreamt this would happen, I can assure you. And here I am back second time.
Round two, and I think many of the files you are already familiar with because some of them haven't changed a whole lot from your first trip through the office.
You're right, of course, and and haven't changed that much. But of course, agriculture is continually changing, as everything else is in the world, and it's my job and the agricultural sector's job to keep up with the technology and the changing technology, and we're doing that in this country. Farmers are innovators, I can assure you, and in fact, to be a successful farmer, you have to be an innovator, and they are.
As mentioned, you were in Asia last week. Can you share some highlights from that trip? You were in, I believe, Vietnam, Japan, South Korea. Why don't you take us through some of the highlights from the trip?
Well, thank you very much. Of course, being here previously, I have to say that when I was in Vietnam previously, like the young population, 100 million people, what an opportunity for exports for Canada's food products. And I was really keen to go back to Vietnam, and I wasn't long till I did go back. And it was very interesting. What we did in all of the countries is met with the importers. That's so interesting to sit down with the importers. And we had some agricultural sectors people with us. There were 17 different agricultural sector people with Mary Ng and myself, but we went to Hanoi and Seoul. But sitting down with the importers is so interesting because you get the meat of the issue, really. You find out, and there was no complaints, but of course, in that part of the world, food availability is a big issue. Like Japan imports about 2/3 of what they eat, and it's always a requirement to make sure they have a steady supply. And in Vietnam, a large amount of what they consume, and Seoul too. So it was interesting and I hope productive. Actually, like you have at these meetings, then you have a social event and you invite importers from. And if I remember correctly, the three countries we're in, the functions that we have for the importers were attended much larger than we expected, which is a good thing. But again, with that, Kelvin, we have to produce it too. So that's both ends. They want a reliable supplier and we want a reliable market.
Your government has announced $31.8 million for this Indo-Pacific Ag Office. Where is the process of establishing that office at right now?
It's going to open in, I don't know if the date has been announced yet. It will be, I think, in sometime possibly in February. I don't know if I'm supposed to announce that or not, but I think that's about the time it will open. And that is so important because on these roundtables that we had or meetings with the importers, I know it's very important, and they certainly appreciate too. Like we're making a big indication that we're there to stay and we want representation there, and that was certainly it went over very well at the meetings that we had that were open that office in Manila.
All right. There are a few other topics I want to ask you about here closer to home. Of course, Bill C-234 is going for third reading in the Senate today. It would remove the federal carbon levy from natural gas and propane used on farms, similar to the home heating oil exemption that your government announced in Atlantic Canada a couple of weeks ago. We know you voted against C-234 in the House of Commons, Minister, but at this point, what's your position on this bill? Where do you stand on it?
Oh, it serves the farmers well, and it's good to see it happen.
So have you changed your stance on it then?
Um, it's the carbon tax exception. Yeah.
Yeah. So there is also a motion, I believe, your opposition, the Shadow Minister of Agriculture, John Barlow, is bringing a motion to the House Ag Committee as well, calling you to the committee to share your stance on the carbon tax. Can you fill us in on what your message would be to the committee if you are called before it?
No, well, of course, the answer would be no. I mean, look, Kelvin, I haven't been back a long time, but I've talked to farmers right across the country, and they see the devastation right in different areas. I mean, my own province alone, I mean, we had winds of over 200 kilometers an hour, destroyed, burned, killed dairy cattle. I mean, then temperatures dropped to over 50 below zero. We understand in that end of the country that there's a massive climate problem. And on the prairie, like talking to farmers and seeing a bale of straw worth $300. I mean, I'm a farmer. That's massive. They understand quite clearly that we need to address the climate issue, and a tax on pollution is certainly very well accepted. And to think that 8 out of 10 Canadians receive more money than they put in goes over very well.
But do you believe that farmers should be exempt from that tax on pollution?
What you have to do in this situation is to make sure that we address the issue, and that is what we're doing, Kelvin. What we have to do, farmers understand that the issue of carbon, the issue of climate has to be addressed. And if we do not do it, you pay it one way or the other in massive destruction or doing what we're doing. So I talking to farmers, they seem to be quite agreeable.
Okay, I'm trying to get clarity on where you stand here. Are quite agreeable to having C234 and this motion or this measure go through?
No.
Okay. So you believe there should still be a carbon price that applies on propane and natural gas?
Well, farmers understand that we have to deal with the climate issue. They understand we've created a temporary pause, as you know, in the eastern part of the country on home heating oil and that type of thing. What we have to do is address the major issue that's affecting the world and what's affecting Canada. Doubling the rural top up on pollution is so important too.
All right. Another topic I wanted to ask you about is agri-recovery. Of course, the funds were announced a couple of weeks ago. That's actually where this conversation, this interview, it's been in the works since then. Can you comment on how the agri-recovery program? You mentioned the price of bales in Western Canada. Can you fill us in on how that agri-recovery process came about? Of course, the requests were filed prior to you becoming minister, and you moved into the office. There was a bit of a delay, and some of the provinces have hinted that the funds aren't at the amount that they were originally seeking. Can you speak to how the agri-recovery program for drought in Western Canada came together?
Well, of course, the way it comes together, agri-recovery is part of the business risk programs, and you know very well they're put together with the provinces, territories, and the federal government, and this agreement reached. And of course, with the disasters, the province puts together with the agricultural sector the problem and the devastation. And they send the papers to Ottawa, and that's a criteria that you must follow in order to, and it's a federal provincial agreement, not just federal, but both. And it's not easy to put these programs together. When I was here previously, we worked at it. But the program, we ended up sending $219 million of federal dollars totally to Saskatchewan, Alberta, and British Columbia, which is, and then 40% more of that on provincially on top, which helps. But in the end, farmers end up paying, of course, in the end. But it's the There's no doubt there's a lot of speculation and talk that when we sit down again with the Fed provincial conference, that we look at the business risk management programs and just how they could possibly meet the requirements of farmers better and quicker. And I would certainly be in favor of that.
Do you have any ideas on something that you'd like to see in terms of meeting that expectation or that request?
Well, of course, Kelvin, we're talking to the agricultural sector. There's been a number of suggestions. I don't want to be quite simply, we'll sit down if there's a way working with the provinces and territories to put something together that can be done faster. I'd be all for it, and to be more inclusive if it can be. That is because in the end, food is so important, and the production of food is so important.
You and your cabinet colleagues, Minister, were asked to come up with $15 billion in savings earlier this fall. Will your department, will agriculture be affected by this?
Of course, we have to take that. I think it's a 3% reduction, and we have to find it within the department. What we have to do is make sure it affects very little any of the agricultural programs that are in place. These programs are put in place in order to make sure that we stimulate the agricultural sector, and we want to continue to do that.
Any word on where that 3% will be found?
Well, it's not an easy task, I can assure you that. But that's in fact what we're doing, and that is what my job is, to make sure that we watch carefully that that we don't affect the agricultural programs.
All right.
To any great extent. But you're asked to take 3% out, so you have to take 3% out.
We're also coming up on a year since the announcement of the Sustainable Ag Strategy, and since those consultations and meetings started. Our understanding is that that group has been meeting regularly. Where is the process at with the Sustainable Ag Strategy, rolling it out, and the timeline for it?
Well, I can't give you the actual timeline, but the fact is we have, as you know, a good group of people working together, and I've met a number of the organizations since I came back here that are working on that strategy. And of course, what we want to make sure is that, and I firmly believe too, though I didn't put this together, is to make sure it comes from the bottom to the top. That's what is important, that the agricultural sector is on board and they understand fully that there's a problem. Like, there's always problems with what you do, how you do it, how you get there with price on carbon and this type of thing. But the fact is, the agricultural sector realizes that, and we have a great bunch of people sitting down. And what we need, and I suspect we will get, is a strategy that's suitable to the sector in particular. And that's what's so vitally important.
Are you concerned at all that some groups may drop away from the table and not participate anymore?
Well, I hope it does not happen, but you know, it can happen. It can happen, and probably it might. But all you can do is, we got a problem to deal with. We got a lot of sector representation sitting down, putting this together. And of course, as I said, I didn't put it together, but the fact is, it's, in my view, put together correctly. And what we need to do is make sure the groups are agreement. And I have to say, with the groups that I've met, there seems to be a lot of agreement. But until we get it together, we have to get it together. And that's simply what we want to do. And I have to admit, with the groups that I met, they also want to get it together, but with an understanding that's the problem in the world.
One file that hasn't seen a whole lot of change since you were in the Minister of Agriculture the first time around is the Grain Act review. And Minister Bibeau earlier this year said she was hoping to move ahead on this file by the end of 2023. Any update on the Grain Act review? Has there been any activity on that file under your watch?
The answer is yes. And the fact is, we have met with a number of people. I wouldn't say daily, but quite often I've met groups that are quite interested in making sure. But what we want to do is have a path that that will suit. There's a lot of changes take place. You take the canola industry. When the Grain Act was put in place, was hardly in existence, and they're the biggest producers today. So
Yeah.
there's a lot of things that we want to do with the Grain Act.
All right. Any word on your mandate letter? We're running through a bunch of topics here, and some of these I think would be covered in a mandate letter from the Prime Minister's office. Any word on where that's at?
I didn't hear yet, but it'll come.
It'll come. Okay. All right. And finally, then, Minister MacAulay, we've covered a whole bunch of topics here. It's been a bit of a rapid fire discussion, but what do you see as your priorities moving forward as the Minister of Agriculture for our industry?
Kelvin, number one is to help the industry and make sure that whatever changes we make does not negatively affect the agricultural sector. That's my number one priority. And of course, that also involves making sure that we have market. That's why I was so keen to make this trip to the Pacific Rim and to make sure that the beef industry, has declined a little bit in the last year or two. So that's concerning. What I want to do is anything we can do in order to make sure that the beef industry remains strong, because Canadian beef is so sought after worldwide. It truly is. And they've done a great job in marketing the Canadian beef, like with the videos they put out showing the rolling hills, the crystal clear water. Man, that sells great in other countries around the world, because we have such a beautiful, large country, grass-fed animals. Couldn't ask for much better.
Do you see there being a need for more incentive in terms of recognizing carbon sequestration and those types of the environment, ecological benefits to grasslands to protect grasslands so we can maintain that herd?
It very well could be, but I wouldn't be sure. But yes, and we don't want them broken. But of course, when they're broken, it changes the picture altogether. We do not want to see that happen.
All right. Well, thank you for taking the time and being willing to discuss all these different topics today, Minister.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, looking forward to our next conversation.
Thank you.